is customary for our National Grid meetings. We'll talk briefly about COVID and force majeure. And we'll dive into the interconnection process, starting with the simplified, following on with the expedited and the standard process. And not too many changes there, but there are some tweaks that we will make mention of working through or stepping through those processes. We'll then dive into some post interconnection updates as we continue with internal process changes and making sure that we are sharing that with everybody. We'll give a quick update for the Central Western Mass study, the cluster study, the area studies that have been going on there. Many people may have projects in that area, or many people may be looking at that area to see what's happening. So we just want to make sure with those studies finalizing here in the last month that we share some of that high level information as to what's going to happen. We're also having some updates to our ISAs, specifically in attachment 2 and 3, right, with some of the other orders that have come out here recently around ASOs, and obviously the ASO studies that we've been doing more frequently here in Massachusetts. A couple general announcements at the end, and then we'll dive into any Q&A that may exist. So there was a link as part of the invite to fill out and send in questions, right? So any questions that were sent in prior, we did take a look at, and we'll be posting that link here in the chat for this meeting here, so you guys can have an easier access to it. So if you do have any questions, you can submit them through that link. It will pop up, and we'll read and address those at the end. One last mention, right, about questions. We are going to look to move through the presentation and address all questions at the end. So if you don't mind keeping yourselves on mute to make it easier for the presenters to, so there's no background noise and any of that fun stuff I'm sure we're all very used to in our new world here. So just moving quickly into the safety moment, fall safety reminders. As we all get ready to turn our heat on, I've been fighting it and I haven't done it yet, at least here in the Northeast. Right, so just make sure that you test it out. You make sure everything's working properly. Once it gets really cold, if something goes wrong, getting your hands on repair people may be a little bit more difficult, as everybody's sort of in the same boat turning stuff on. So a little bit of prior planning works out well there if you get a cooler day and want to turn it on and make sure everything's working well. Use caution with space heaters, right? If you haven't turned your heat on, maybe you're using a space heater to keep smaller spaces warm, as we all spend more time in our house. So just make sure you're using it the way it's supposed to be used, and you understand, right, what the uses of it are, and definitely turn it off when you're done using it. Exercise some candle caution. There's a few aspects here, right? One, decoration wise, as we move into the holidays, and making sure that we or you understand the right uses for that. And then also, as the weather gets worse, right, there's more potential for power outages and the use of candles there. So don't ever leave a candle on overnight. Don't ever leave one unattended. Just, again, be smart about using those. I think we're coming up on daylight savings time. Usually around daylight savings time, you want to be checking and changing your batteries in your smoke detectors and carbon monoxide detectors. So keep that in mind here over the next couple of weeks. And then remember that the sun is rising later and setting earlier. Also goes along with the daylight savings time, right? That if you are traveling or moving about, if you are commuting, right, some of that is going to be done more in the dark now than it was here over the last several months. And just make sure that you're conscious about turning on your headlights, right, and you may have some visibility issues. And one big thing that I like to champion quite often, especially this time of year, is cleaning the inside of your windshield. It's easy to clean the outside, right, with your windshield washer fluid and your wipers, but usually you don't think about the inside of your windshield until you get in the car and you see those lights coming back at you, and whatever fog and whatnot from using your heater, or maybe from using your air conditioner over the summer months here. So just be cognizant of the inside of your windshield also, and spend some time cleaning that periodically. Just a few safety messages, or yeah, a few safety messages here. And then moving into the force majeure, right? So we declared a force majeure back at the end of March, for the company. Um, we have been working as close to blue sky operations as we can here over the last several months. Right, we obviously continue to monitor the situation. National Grid hasn't been immune to issues and sicknesses and in working practice. So we've done our best to keep any impacts to a minimum, but we have had impacts. We do expect to have further impacts here going forward, and we are leaving that force majeure in place, sort of a general force majeure. Projects that have seen direct COVID impacts have been contacted and talked to about those as we work through mitigating those. So there have been specific force majeures identified on certain projects, and we've been lucky enough to keep those to a minimum. One of the big things that was happening more often in the spring than it is now, right, was the misunderstanding around payment dates when it comes to a force majeure, right? And the force majeure does not extend payment timelines. Back in the back in the spring, we did offer some payment extension timeframes by request to make sure that we were being conscious of things being shut down and issues that were arising here in or there in the spring. But just a reminder that a force majeure does not extend payment dates. And if we have anything to update around the force majeure, we do have a force majeure website as part of the portal. So we have that link here for when this presentation is posted. So those were the opening comments overall. So with that, we're actually going to jump into the process discussion, and we will start off with Margaret Campbell and the simplified process.
Thanks, Will. So as Will said, I'm Margaret Campbell. I'm the supervisor for the Simplified Application Development Team, and we're going to walk through the simplified process today. So to start off, what is simplified? Simplified criteria are UL 1741 SA listed inverters that are 15 kW or less for single phase and 25 kW or less for three phase. This is the aggregated capacity of all inverters, including AC batteries, which is coming up as a more common question now with like the power walls and some of the other AC batteries, that it is solar plus the power wall for these limits for simplified. And also for projects to stay within the simplified process, they do need to pass all the simplified screens. And next slide. Thank you. The steps within the simplified process, there's the first one's developer submits the application. Once that's submitted, National Grid's going to review it. Once it's deemed complete, we're going to go ahead and issue conditional approval. At that time, the system can be constructed. And once construction is complete, the developer will submit the completion package to National Grid. We'll review it. Once it's deemed complete, we'll go ahead and order any required meters. And once they're set, you'll receive authority to interconnect. And next slide. Thank you. Timelines for simple. So when you first submit your application through our portal, you're going to get an automatic response just saying we've received it. You do want to make sure you receive that just to ensure everything was completed in the portal and it was actually submitted to us for a review. And once that's submitted, we'll go ahead and review it within 10 days. There is an additional 15 to 20 days for screening if required. And then because it's simplified, we get to skip a whole bunch of steps. And then we go down to the completion documents, witness test. So once the completion documents, along with the photos for the witness test, certificate of completion is submitted, we review that. And if it's complete, your meter will be set within 10 days. Next slide. Thank you. Couple common holds we see in this process we just want to review with the group today just to try to have your applications run through as smoothly as possible. Um, so on the initial application, it does need to match the customer's account. A couple ones we commonly see not matching are name, address, account number, and meter number. Account number and meter number really are common issues with multi-unit buildings. We really want to make sure those match so everything works for the customer. With Mass Smart, a copy of the bill is required for that Mass Smart application. So if you already have that handy, it's nice to have that out when you're filling out our application. It has all this information listed there, and then we can ensure they match when you're submitting it and just help prevent that hold. And you also do want to wait until after conditional approval to go to construct the system. Um, just in case there's any concerns, especially in screening, you don't want to have the system constructed and then realize it failed screening and asset work is required. So after conditional approval, all the forms required for completion become available in the portal. One of them is the service upgrade form. You do want to submit that before the rest of the completion documents so you can get the work request. The work request number is provided to the inspector so they can call it in after their inspection. And that kind of leads to our last point here. Um, often we don't, the often hold reason we see for completion documents is that inspection not being called in. And we've made this recent enhancement to our portal to try to address that because it is in the hands of the inspector to make sure that's called in. So you have visibility of that. We've added the work request number and the status of that municipal inspection to our portal. So when you're viewing a case, if you go to the related tab and then kind of scroll down towards the bottom, you can, there's a little snippet of the screenshot here. Under the work order header, you can see that work order number and the status. So if that's still required, we do suggest you follow up with the inspector before submitting the completion documents. It'll, if that's called in, it prevents the hold and it'll just keep things moving quicker. And especially with kind of the end of year coming up, which we're going to talk about next, having it run smoothly will be appreciated. And next slide, whenever you're ready. So one reminder for the end of year for Simplified, we do see a lot of a high volume of applications towards the end of the year. I know there's some changes with the incentive for the end of the year, especially a lot of projects are looking for authority to interconnect before that December 31st deadline. But kind of with the timelines we reviewed earlier, there's holidays obviously in December, and there's always the potential for winter storms. So we do suggest if you're looking for authority to interconnect by December 31st, please have your completion package submitted to us by the 8th. And if there's any holds, please address those as soon as possible. We're going to be working these up till the end of the year, but that eighth deadline is really what we're suggesting. Have your completion documents submitted if you're looking for ATI by the end of the year. We always see a few at the end of the year where if you submit it on December 30th, your meter's most likely not going to be set in time. And that's unfortunate for the customer. So please be aware of that December 8th guideline. And that's our simplified process. So I'll turn it over to Mike Armel now to review the expedited process.
Okay, hi, I'm Mike Armel. I'm a job owner on the application development team, and I'll go over the expedited criteria. So we'll be looking at a single phase customers with listed single phase inverters, a system with power ratings greater than 15 kW, as well as systems greater than 25 kW on a radial feed on expedited cases. So where, you know, obviously the simples would be the ones below. So that would entail with batteries, et cetera. Any project that didn't pass the simplified process screens. So typically, especially in residential cases and smaller commercial jobs, this would be when we have to reconfigure secondary or we have to upgrade transformers in the field. They will have to go through further screening and not be handled as simplified. So non-simplified projects that do not require an impact study, they will also be typically handled as an expedited case. The maximum size of supplemental review is based on the review of these screens. Next slide. So for the interconnection process steps, in the expedite world, you can fill out the pre-application form. It can behoove you to do that so that you can review that with our folks to see if the project is as what you think it to be, as far as what's going on feeders, et cetera, and locally. On cases greater than 500 kW, it is required. On these expedited cases less than that, it's not required, but you may want to explore that. So our applications come into the expedited queue, and they were reviewed by a job owner for the application, the payments, and then a high-level view of site plans, et cetera, and one-line documents. We then would send this into screening or engineering review, and it will go through multiple screens. If it is deemed that it needs a little bit further review and it needs a supplemental review, that it will go to that queue. Following the completion of either of those stages, it would then go to conditional approval to construct the system, and we would deliver an ISA at that time. If construction is required and the payments have been received specifically for the project, we will then begin our field construction. At the completion of that, we would go through what we call it the witness test process. However, we'll go through regular completion document review, where we'd be looking for a commissioning memo rather than a witness test. We don't typically use witness tests on the expedited cases. After the meter is set and everything has been approved, we will give authority to interconnect. If the project is greater than 60 kW, we will deliver that after the asset has been registered with ISO. Thank you. Okay. So the path of the job for an expedited case is we would receive the application, and within the 3 days, you will get the automatic email that it has been received, acknowledging that that we do have it. Then it goes into a 10 business day review application stage, where someone as myself will review, as I discussed earlier, for completion of applications, payments, again, high level view of tech sheets and one lines, etc. From there, we would then assign it to screening. So that's a 25 business day turnaround. So in the screening process, they're reviewing multiple things. One of the key thresholds is if the aggregate generation is less than 60% of the minimum load on the feeder, they are looking to make sure that the project does not kick that screen and fail that screen. Other screens review voltage quality, reliability, and safety to reduce the potential need for impact studies. Also with your paperwork, and if it does apply, relay control systems must be well defined to make supplemental review easier. So if the job is deemed to need further supplemental review, it is 20 days in supplemental review versus not needing it, and it would go right to the ISA stage, conditional approval. So with the completion of either of those two stages, we have 10 days to draft an ISA. And the total time frame would either be 45 days if it had no supplemental review, and 65 days if it did. The construction schedule will vary based on the project. It will be listed on the ISA. Obviously, there's different milestones that have to be met on certain projects that aren't on certain ones that are more straightforward, i.e. permitting, etc. So the witness test expedited case, typically we will follow that commissioning memo process as part of the completion process rather than a traditional witness test. Thank you. We touched on this at the last webinar, but I thought we'd bring it up again. The infrastructure list view can be found at the bottom of the homepage on the portal. Lists of all feeders in each jurisdictions for all Mass, New York, and Rhode Island can be sorted by feeder name, substation transformer name, operating district, connected DG, pending DG, all in kilowatts AC, whether or not the feeders are registered with FERC. And as Margaret had said, you can also review for your municipal inspections specific to each work order that's associated with the case. Typically, we're looking for the mass smart meter install with the project. Thank you. So we have the completion document process. For most applications, we use the commissioning memo. The commissioning memo has to be on company letterhead. This is in lieu of a witness test. That commissioning memo should contain the 2-second shutdown when disconnect open test, the 5-minute before restart when disconnect is closed test, confirm the system matches the as-built, and include the most recent version of the as-built. List the inverter relay frequency and trip time settings specific for this project. One of the issues that we see in errors with the commissioning memo is they're not in agreement. So we want to have the as-built obviously be the stamped, signed, and dated by the same person that's doing the commissioning test. We want to have the signature and the date agree. So the same signer and the same date on both forms. We expect to see photos as part of the completion package. So we do want to see a picture of the meter or a socket to show the permanent plaque visible at eye level that includes the warning of the generator installed. We also want to see that on the AC utility disconnect switch. If it is not grouped with the utility meter, we want to have a placard highly visible at that area to indicate where it is located. Again, this is not just for National Grid personnel, this is for first responders to get to that disconnect if required. So that is something that we do require as part of the completion document on the placard. Thank you. Another part of the projects, if we have a job that is greater than 60 kW in Massachusetts, we do require insurance, evidence of insurance. Typically what we see for errors is sometimes when a job is longer, it may be expired or the insured doesn't match what we have on the legal documents. There are minor specifics that we can review with the job owner or with risk specific to an individual project. However, typically, those are some of the high level things that we do see on those forms. For QF facilities, qualifying facilities, all jobs require a Schedule A. If the job is greater than 60 kilowatts, we would be looking for a W-9, an ACH form, as well as a supplier enrollment form. Okay, lastly, for the metering reminder, jobs greater than 60 kW in Mass do require interval metering, wireless, or a phone line. We prefer wireless. There are cases, obviously, when you can't get a signal somewhere where a line will be permitted. However, we prefer the wireless meters. Company requires a 4G wireless signal test on a Verizon network in order to provide wireless metering. If the phone line is being used, it has to be dedicated and terminated at the meter location. The line must be 100% copper. Fiber lines do not communicate properly. These meters are long lead time items, and prep time can be 6 to 8 weeks. So it is important to work through this with your job owner well in advance to when you intend to seek authority to interconnect. The wireless test form link is here. It's also located within the form. You can complete it within the form on the case. Thank you. That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. So Marisa Kiefer will take over the standard review process.
Hi, everyone. My name is Marisa. I am a job owner on the complex team under Will. So I'll bringing through a couple things here. And as the others have mentioned, I'll be focusing on process changes. However, I'll give a review of some of the items on the standard process that's slightly different than the other tracks. So the standard criteria applies to projects that do require an impact study, that are generally greater than 500 kilowatt, but sometimes include smaller projects that have complexity. They require system modifications at the substation level, or they may have non-listed inverters. Some of the examples of that include induction, synchronous, asynchronous. Most CHP systems do require going through the standard track, and as it's listed there, kind of a catch-all if you would like to see the full criteria, you can refer to the tariff. A couple things on the process that I'll just highlight that are distinct from what we previously covered. So one of the big things that's in addition to the expedited is the impact study, which is a little bit longer duration than the supplemental review. These projects also require going through design, which is distinct from a study. I just want to clarify that. Design is where we design our system modifications in greater detail. And then we've also called out a witness test because that is required for standard projects, meter installation, registering of assets, and then our authorization to interconnect. So again, just focusing here on the items that are a little bit different than the previous expedited process. So the impact study duration is 55 to 60 days or by mutual agreement, depending on complexity. If a detailed study is done, that can take 30 to 60 days. The ISA is sent in the 15 business days, and the witness test is 10 days from the company's approval of the witness test checklist. It's listed as procedures here, but that means all required documentation has been submitted and all construction is complete on both the developer and the National Grid side. Next slide. So there's a couple things here. We'll post these slides if you'd like to review it a little bit more detail. However, I'll give a couple highlights. So the impact study will determine the system modifications required and the cost. The ISO New England generator notification process, is referred to as submitting the PP5 or GNF. So this is completed during the impact study. Your job owner will help you through this process, and this, along with supporting any transmission study that might be required, can often put the project on hold. Again, your job owner will let you know any impact, but we do keep things moving as much as possible. These requirements do add time to the interconnection process beyond what is listed as the 55-day study. And if there's holds, obviously that can significantly increase the duration of the interconnection process as well, while that is determined what impact there is. If substation modifications are required, the company has an additional 5 business days, bringing the study up to 60 business days, or by mutual agreement if the estimated construction is greater than $1 million. And you will be contacted by your job owner if that is the case. As I mentioned before, design is used to determine the details of the system modifications before moving into construction. And another flag for a part of the process that is not always exclusively called out is easements and permitting, and specifically right of way, can take a good amount of duration, and they are required before we move into construction, as we cannot construct on third parties' property without those permissions. Another general announcement, our team structure has transitioned. I believe we mentioned this on our last webinar, but we just wanted to let everyone know that we have fully implemented our new team structure with the pre and post ISA focused teams. Jennifer Chalifo is our pre-ISA supervisor and Laura McLaughlin is our post-ISA supervisor. This means that you will have one account manager assigned for each portion of the process, pre and post, and then account managers are generally geographically located. So if you have a cluster of projects in one region, you are likely to have the same job owner on those projects. If you're not sure who your account manager is, on the portal, you can search for your project once you sign in at the very top, and then scroll down to the details portion, and they will be listed in the top right. Remember to always post chatters on the case feed, tagging your account manager with the @ symbol, and that ensures that they get the notification. A couple witness test reminders. So the witness test checklist was updated in May. So if you downloaded it a while back and haven't reviewed the new checklist, please make sure to take a look. The main change is around requiring specific photos, but no dramatic changes there. The photos are covering generators, including the nameplate, transformers, and grounding equipment. These are photos that you need for your compliance documents anyways, so this is just a little earlier in the process. Remember that your engineering documents can be approved in advance, but all checklist requirements must be provided and all construction must be completed prior to scheduling the witness test. If you have additional specific questions around your witness test, obviously you can always reach out to your account manager and they can add any additional detail that is needed. One more update on the ATI process. So asset registration is going to be required as part of the compliance or completion documents going forward. This is something that National Grid applies on behalf of the interconnecting customer. All incentive projects, including qualifying facility and net metering greater than 60 kilowatts, do require asset registration with ISO before ATI is granted because we cannot backdate those incentive payments. Asset registration typically takes between 5 and 10 business days. One exception is behind the meter class 2 and 3 net metering and demand response systems. They are exempt from being registered as a settlement only generator. AC battery standalone projects do need to be registered separately with ISO if they are generating power to the grid. Again, this is not a big change into the process, but if you have any questions, you can always reach out to your job owner. So I'll pass it on to Lorna.
Or we cannot hear you if you are speaking. Still cannot hear you.
Hi, good morning, everyone. Sorry about that. Having some technical issues here. My name is Lorna Burnett, and I'm from the Post Interconnection team. Can we go to the next slide, please? Oh, there we go. So just to give a little bit of overview of the DG Post Interconnection support team, we have created a new portal or a way to contact us regarding post interconnection inquiries. This would include any changes, issues, inquiries for existing projects beyond its interconnection and first bill walkthrough. Some of these may be subsequent allocation requests, management of final accounts, transfer of ownership, billing inquiries, project changes, which may include site modifications. We also have an area for equipment failures or outage coordination, and any type of variances for data that may be coming in between your site and the National Grid bill. We could also touch base on that. Next slide, please. So first, what you'd like to do is go to the National Grid customer portal. That's considered the NCAP. If you could register there, that would be wonderful. Some people have already registered, and if not, there's just a quick tutorial here how to register as a residential or a developer. Next slide, please. And then once you get to the contact us field, there are some required fields. It would be name, email. What you want to choose is yes to your system is installed, and that will give you a certain amount of different drop-down topics. And please provide application number and billing account number if possible so that we can identify existing application. And any additional information or supporting documents can be added as attachments there. Next slide. Just to help with some of the drop-down topics, there are there's 6 different topics. For DG billing inquiries, you can submit any type of billing question, media reading, or data analysis. For credit allocation inquiry, if you have a question about a missed transfer or just how to complete a certain form. Transfer of ownership would be updating Mass Smart information or transferring the system owner and billing customer. We also have power quality high voltage, and that would be for if you're having quality issues with your site, looking to make any site change designs after ATI. And we also have credit allocation change requests. This would be where we would be submitting all of the one-time transfer requests or allocation request changes. There's also a topic for other post-interconnection inquiry, which could be all other. If you're not sure which category to put it in, you can just put it into this topic here. Next slide. Once you've submitted the inquiry, if you have been registered, which is the preferred way to submit an inquiry, you'll receive a response back from the NCAP letting you know it basically restates your question that you submitted. But at the bottom of the home page, you can go to where the suitcase icon is. And if you choose at the drop-down My DG Inquiry, you can actually track all of your inquiry requests. So those are tracked by the case number, the billing account number, or your particular question. We've gotten a lot of great feedback on that, and everyone seems to be quite responsive to it. So again, if you can register, it's the preferred method. Once you are in the DG inquiry, there's 3 different fields there. It would be details, which will provide a description of your inquiry. Related, which will provide a history of comments, and will also, you can view your attachments there. And then feed, and this will be the chatter communication, which Marissa had mentioned earlier. You just want to communicate with whoever is handling your case by putting the @ symbol. Next slide. This again is on the chat. So if you go to your feed section, you'll be able to comment on the case with a specific DG representative. And this actually makes it very easy for communicating back and forth. You can attach documents. It's actually very easy to use. Next slide. So just again, this is the link to get to the home portal. At the top right is going to be the login field, and on the right-hand side, there'll be the contact us, which is where you can submit your. And just a little recap of our post-interconnection team. For simplified inquiries, we have William Morales and Rocio Hernandez. Complex inquiries would go to Tanisha Morton and Jared Gregory. Transfer of ownership would go to myself. And then we have the high voltage power quality would go to Max Isaacson. Next slide. And it looks like we're going to go back to you, Will. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Appreciate that. Thanks for everybody through their presentations. And we'll jump into the last couple of topics here, right? The Central Western Mass study update. So we completed the detailed studies. Again, for anybody who has been involved in this, we completed studies in the cluster study at the end of May or earlier this year. We then worked through the need for further study with the detailed study. We did see some attrition as we moved through and into that process. We completed those detailed studies here at the end of September, right in line with a cluster restudy that needed to be done on the transmission system. So coming out of the end of those detailed studies, here's what we studied in each one of the 7 areas that we've been talking about. So still a very high number of projects and megawatts still looking to interconnect there in the Central Western Mass area. With that came high costs, and this is just the distribution side, right? So there's a couple of pieces here. There were some System improvement work identified, work that National Grid would ultimately do and pay for. This is the remainder. This is the DG-driven modifications that would be needed to the system in each one of these areas to drive some of that work. So, we're in the point now where we're trying to finalize these studies and have customers make a determination what direction they plan on moving forward with. These were the transmission upgrades that were identified through the cluster study, right? So the cluster study was a one-year study starting in spring of 2019 and completing with RC approval in May of 2020. Again, there were a number of issues identified on the transmission system, the largest of which is an A1 B2 69 kV reconductor of that entire line. That's work that is identified as system improvement work and work that New England Power will be moving forward with independent of any of the DG interconnection work to be done. Then there's some other work that's been identified, right? Again, is sort of again system improvement type work that does not require a DG interconnection contribution. And that's work that we'll end up moving forward with. I mentioned we did see some attrition, coming out of the completion of those studies at the end of May. And with that, we did see some work that no longer needs to be done, right? You can see that is number 5 here on the list. There is other work being done that does require a customer contribution to work that is solely needed because of the DG penetration. That's the work at Otter River, the work at Wendell Depot, and then the work at Ware Substation as part of the E5 S6 69 kV line. So again, it is, if your project is looking to connect on any of the substations as part of those lines, you will be required to both, contribute to the work being done, and also needs to wait for that work to be completed until you would be able to interconnect. So, this is more bringing up, this has been communicated obviously to all the impacted projects, but understanding that there, is still a lot of opportunity for projects to look to interconnect in this area, right? We just wanted to make sure that we shared some of this information so people understand the amount of work that would need to be done, some of the timelines, and the expected costs as part of that. Another topic I wanted to discuss, right, with all these ASO studies, with the order that came out over the summer around ASOs from the DPU as part of 1955. We've been, looking at making some changes to the ISA, so it would be looking a little bit different going forward. The biggest difference is the identification of transmission-specific costs. The distribution cost isn't really going to look all that different. Right, if cost sharing applies, we'll look to apply that as we get into group studies, right? Another order coming out of the DPU here in the last year, as we look to utilize group studies and how we work through cost allocation and cost sharing, right? All that stuff is going to be very similar to what we've done in the past. The bigger change is that we have incorporated both transmission scope and transmission cost, transmission specific scope and cost into the ISA. What you'll see in the ISA is really an attachment 2A and an attachment 2B, right? As you would see the scope identified in the distribution portion of the study as part of attachment 2A, and then you would see any scope identified as part of an ASO study in attachment 2B. As we move into attachment 3, right, it would fall on the same way. Attachment 3A would be specific to the distribution scope, system modifications required, and the cost associated with that. And then attachment 3B would be specific to the work and scope identified as part of the transmission and the costs that would be related to that, right? Again, with cost allocation, there's been a lot of discussion on that. Just to reiterate, the current cost allocation methodology is cost causation. And then as we work through, if we have multiple projects or group studies, right, we do work through a pro rata by megawatt to work through any of that cost allocation and cost sharing. Another piece that I want to bring up, which is probably a significant change, is the addition of carrying charges when it comes to ASO upgrade cost. So again, this would be any ASO, right? Most recently, New England Power here is part of some of these ASO studies that we've been working through. New England Power is an affected system operator, and any cost that would be incurred by New England Power doing work and passed along to Mass Electric, those would be passed through, and then carrying charges is part of that. I got another slide that we'll talk a little bit more about that in a second to bring a little bit more attention to it. But going forward, for any ASO related charges, there will be carrying charges that will be added to that and identified in the ISA. And then recently here, relatively recently, I want to say in the last couple of months, another order out of 1955 around the management of high volume queues made a pretty significant change to the payment schedules. So, now and going forward on ISAs, we will have the normal 25-75% payment breakdown, but the 25% payment will be due within 6 days, no longer the 120 that it used to be. And then the remaining 75% will still be due 120 business days, either after the first payment has been made or the first payment was due. So just a number of changes that you'll be seeing in ISAs as we move forward. Want to talk a little bit more about the carrying charges. Again, is probably a more significant change to the ISA. So these are ongoing charges, right? They include O&M, property taxes, other carrying costs. The carrying charge itself is calculated on an annual basis. So what we would be doing in the ISA is giving you what the carrying charge is for that first year, and then that carrying charge would be updated in subsequent years. You can see here in 2020 that percentage is 5.21%. So it's calculated based on a formula identified in NEP Schedule 21. Right, and data from the FERC Form 1. And the total charge is calculated as a product of the total reconciled transmission upgrade costs. So that's the anything that would be ASO related. Again, more often here for Mass Electric when we deal with NEP charges. As you see, any NEP charges in the ISA, those are subject to these carrying charges. Right, and then all ASO update costs, as well as associated ongoing carrying charges, will be passed through to the DG projects, causing the need for the ASO upgrades. So moving out of changes to the ISA, and then just into some final general announcements before we move into the questions. All right, we try to cover as relevant topics as we can in this meeting. Some stuff does hit the cutting room floor as we try to manage the time on people sitting on the phone when it comes to these seminars or webinars. So we are looking on having future webinars here potentially in the next couple of months. Next one, we're looking topic-wise application changes, including ESS questionnaire and battery info stuff that we do run into questions on often. We'll try to put something together and be able to communicate that and be a little bit more, allow the development community to be a little bit more proactive instead of just following up with questions with us. And then third-party costs. All right, this is another topic that's popped up a bit. And we'll probably bring a little bit more attention to it in the future as we identify and work through some process changes and some interfacing between some third parties. But third-party costs are not captured in an ISA. The ISA itself is basically Mass Electric related. So the scope of work is work that Mass Electric would be doing. And again, when it comes to ASO costs, these are ASO costs that Mass Electric it would be charged by the third party or by the ASO, I should say, and would be passed along through the ISA and through the DG interconnecting project. So, as an example, Verizon costs, right? There have been Verizon costs that have popped up. Right, those are costs that are not included in the ISA. Those are costs that the project would be dealing directly with Verizon or some other utility-like third party. And then the last bullet point here, right, is sort of an official notification. I've alluded to a couple of times some of the orders that have come out, but we had some interim guidance become the permanent guidelines around ASO reporting, and communications around that, right? So we have a website where we have been posting any and all ASO related communications per the interim guidance that came out. I think in August or September of last year, those guidelines became permanent with a few tweaks, and we are continuing on with what we've been practicing doing over the last year or so. With providing that information to impacted projects, in addition to posting that communication on the website for people to see. And that does involve some back and forth with the DPU, and then trying to put reporting out there so people understand or projects understand where there are potential ASO studies that could pop up. So with that, we will dive into questions. I think we're pretty much right on time. So we'll start working through questions that have popped up on the through that link that was sent out to everybody. So I'll read the first one off here. I think Margaret, this one is for you around Simplified. So it says, with the total AC for Simplified being 15 kW, will cap allocation still be needed for a project that has an inverter battery combo but is over the 10 kW AC limit? And there's an example that says inverter is 7.6 kW and battery is 5 kW. Total AC 12.6. Cap is needed? Question mark.
Thanks, Will. I can take this one. So there's two different limits that this question is referring to. So for single phase projects, the simplified limit of all connected inverters is 15 kW. And that's the limit that includes solar and storage. There's a separate 10 kW AC limit for net metering, and that one only includes solar. So for this example, with the 7.6 for solar and 5 kW for the battery, that would stay simplified and not require cap allocation because the solar 7.6 is under the 10. If there was a system with 10 kW inverter and then two 5 kW batteries, so total system size is 20, that would need to go expedited, but would still qualify for net metering because the solar is the 10 kW.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay. Next question. It says, is there a way that we can view in the portal with NG team members assigned, or which NG team member is assigned to the project? So Marisa did touch on that, I believe, in her portion of the presentation, but if you did go and you scroll down, you would be able to see who your job owner is. And so there are a couple of different statuses that I will point out that are generic as the project moves through its life cycle, usually earlier on in the life cycle, and then through some transition periods as we move the project from a screening status into a sort of active project status as it moves into whether it's Margaret's team, Mike's team, Mike Armel's team, or mine. It may be in a generic owner for a brief period of time before a job owner is assigned to it, but also in relation to what Marisa brought up about how we are structured now with a pre and post ISA teams, in addition to coverage areas being regional. Right, that if you've dealt with someone in the past, on that status of the project in that area, most likely would be assigned to that same person, but you would be able to find it in the portal. Next question is, can you explain the threshold between moderate and significant changes during the impact study process, and then specifically regarding changes to PV and energy storage system sizes? So Mike, I'll take a first pass at Mike Porcaro is on the phone with us. Mike Porcaro is our DG Ombuds person for New England. But I'll take a first pass and sort of saying that it's hard to really identify the difference between a moderate and a significant change. It really does come down to a sliding scale. There are a number of factors that come into play. First off is just where it's located, right? The characteristics of that feeder, the characteristics of that substation, also comes into play. The overall saturation of that area, who else is in queue, so all that factors in when we look at a change being made to a project that would then determine, right, what level of study would then need to be required, how long that study would take and cost, in addition to how we would then manage the queue in that, right? So there are, significant changes pre-ISA that would drive a project to be withdrawn and canceled, right? And we try to look at a number of different aspects of that. But Mike, I'll hand it over to you if you have any other technical pieces you want to speak to.
Yeah, thanks, Will. Yeah, so that's a pretty good summary, actually. That captures it. It really does depend on the circuit itself, the characteristics of our system, and the nature of what exactly is changing in the design of a particular DG site. And we do have that interim guidance from the DPU about specific levels and ways of integrating storage and what that would mean for restudy times, or whether it's a significant or moderate change from that perspective. With thinking about how it gets analyzed, a significant change would definitely be one that requires us to go back and redo our modeling for either the protective device modeling or the steady state load flow condition. So that's another piece that factors into whether or not it would be significant from the analysis perspective, in addition to the factors that Will was just talking about, in considering the queue and fairness and some other parts of just the processing part of that as well. So.
Thanks, Mike. And then we got one other question on here on the list now. So if you guys got other questions, please submit them. We're happy to stick around and try to answer some of those. But this is the last one we got, and it says, "Is there a way to do a group email and CC others from your team in the chatter functionality?" So if you're chattering and if you at somebody, right? So if you put an at symbol KERN. It should pop up my name. So if you added me to the chat, then I would also receive an email directed towards me coming from the portal. So if you were looking to add additional people, whether it would be me or additional job owners, then the job owner who's named for that case in the portal, anytime you add a chatter, the case owner does receive an email and a notification. If you add additional people, those people will also receive that chatter and be able to see what you're writing. And again, there's links that come with that would allow us to immediately enter the portal to follow on any other additional chatters. And then if I think you can also set up a group email address for portal notifications. I believe on the developer side, because I know most of the time, you have one project type owner who would receive these notifications, on the back and forth. And if you reach out to the portal team using that contact us button in the portal, if you're having trouble setting up the account or the application role, you can work through with them, again, using that contact us. Okay, looks like we have a couple other questions. I think the next one is just not National Grid from my company or our engineers. Yeah, so I think I answered that on the second half of that last question, right? That that there is an option to set up a group email address in the portal. If you're having trouble setting that up, the contact us button will get you to the right person who can help walk you through the process. We have a question here around, can you update on the group study process? So yeah, Mike, you can obviously weigh in also, but we got a couple aspects here, right? So the group study provision ended up back in the tariff here recently here in the last few months. From work that we've been doing over the last couple of years, working with the DPU and the DG stakeholders. So we have been trying to review and implement that into our processes and our portal to make sure that we understand how to go about creating groups, right? The right communication process, that we're expected to include the customers on, keeping them informed as to what it is we're trying to do, and ultimately who's in the group. And again, having the portal work to, because there are some significant changes both in timelines, process. Again, that communication, the interaction between the projects in the group. There's a lot of moving parts. We've been having a number of internal conversations, right? Not just trying to figure out the process, but then trying to figure out how we implement that process in the portal. So we actually opened for the first time. It was about a month ago, right? Maybe a little bit more than a month. Opened up some group study windows, right? Projects that were behind the cluster study that've been on hold. All right, they've been on an ASO hold here for a while in some cases because of the cluster study and the cluster restudy and all those other things that we discussed earlier in the meeting. Right, but we opened up a group study window, 40-day group study window. I think that closes sometime early November, right, giving a chance for, we've actually seen that list of projects behind the cluster continue to grow here for several months. So we wanted to open up the maximum window to allow any projects that were looking, and obviously with the new information being provided, with the completion of those studies, we wanted to give the opportunity for people to digest that information and be able to make a decision if they want to submit additional projects into the queue. So that window will close here again in the next few weeks, and then we'll start working through the process, right? We're learning just like everybody else is. I think we have a plan about what and how we're going to communicate. Once we close those group study windows, we have an idea of what the group areas look like. All right, that may be a little bit different than the areas that we created a couple of years ago and been working through since. And we'll be able to communicate, what the plan is, what the next steps are. I will, make mention that these groups are all relatively large still, right? There's still a lot of work in the queue. There's still a lot of opportunity in the area, and hopefully, as we work towards making some of these modifications, right, and additional capacity is being created, we'll be able to keep moving forward in interconnecting in Central and Western Mass. Mike, anything else you want to add?
No, well, I think you captured it well. Nothing more to add there.
Great. So just looking to see additional questions. It says, are you currently performing transformer upgrades that might extend the timeline for some applications? So kind of a tough question to answer, just in the sense of, right, Nashua is always doing work, right? So whether it's customer related work, right, be it load customers or DG customer related work, in addition to right, our normal maintenance type work or our capital improvement type projects that we have going on. Right, we try to be very upfront, right, when we're aware of capital projects, right, national grid driven projects that are going to go on that could impact the timeline for a project. We try to build that into the ISA timeline, just to make sure that we're being as transparent as possible. Understanding that outage schedules are a big driver to our execution schedules and what ends up in ISAs. Right, the space inside a substation, it really can't have two projects going on at the same time. Right, and so there are impacts like that, and usually we're aware of what that plan is and what those timelines and those projects are when we get to the point of completing the study and writing the ISA, and we definitely try to communicate those at that time. So hopefully I answered that question adequately enough, right? But you could see extended schedule timelines in the ISA if there is other work that's happening in the area. And then another question. So this again looks to be the last one on the list for right now. So if you guys have any additional ones, you want to submit those now. It says, what is your current policy on payments for distribution side single or group study if the project is on an ASO hold? So when it comes to the ISA and the timelines within the ISA, the payment timelines within that ISA hold, whether the project is on hold or not for any reason. We have moved up our ASO sort of engagement process. I think we've covered this in a couple of these seminars, right? But prior to some of the issues that we've seen here in the last couple of years, we had a post to ISA GNF process, right, where we engage the ISO, right, with those generated notification forms after the ISA, after construction has started. Realizing the need for potential, or transmission studies more often now, and the potential for transmission modifications to be identified. We've taken that whole process and moved it into pre-ISA, into the study timeframe. Right, within that study timeframe for a single project, group study will be a little different with the timeframes, right? But for a single project, on or about the 20th business day of the study, we have an idea of what the injection point of that that site's going to be, and we were able to engage the ISO on whether a ASO study is based on doing all that, right? The distribution impact study fee has already been paid at that time. If there is an ASO study required, or an ASO study fee would then be invoiced and collected. But you would have all information around an ASO and would not expect an ASO hold once an ISA has been delivered and executed, right? And then that goes back to some of the changes I mentioned on attachment 2 and 3 earlier, right? That you'll be provided with all information, right? Information from the distribution study, information from the ASO study. So you'll have an idea of all the scope, all the cost, and the impact of the schedule of all that work being done prior to signing and prior to running into any sort of kayak payment timelines. Okay, so it does say here that it's specifically talking about the study payments. I think I addressed that too, right? So in the ASO hold, the project shouldn't, if a project is going on an ASO hold because it's behind an existing ASO study, we would not be collecting study payments until we were ready to move that project forward, right? So if your project was coming out of screening and you're going to be behind an ongoing area study, right, then we would not be issuing an impact study agreement. We would not be requiring any sort of fees to be paid to maintain that spot. And again, if you were going on an ASO hold while during a study, you would have already made the impact study payment, and then you would be study fee to go along with that. So hopefully that covered everything. Okay, so it looks like so another question just popped up. Kavita, you're on fire. Said, are you doing distribution studies in parallel with ASO studies? So I think that that's going to be on a case-by-case basis. I'd have to go back and reread the ASO order, right, from 1955 on exactly where that is. I know that National Grid's thought process around that was that there was some significant risk to performing and completing the distribution study prior to the completion of the transmission study. But that is something I think that we would be willing to talk to on a case-by-case basis. Mike, do you agree with that?
Yep, yeah, it would be case by case. I think that there are very significant risks if we're going to progress them in parallel. And in general, the performance of distribution side analysis, if there's an ASO study that's required, there may be distribution side work or investigation and engineering that goes on in support of the transmission study. If they need to know exactly how many, which projects will be connecting to what substation, if it's a broader area that's being examined, or if a new substation were needed to be installed, that could be determined by distribution. So that'd be a distribution side analysis, but it's really supporting the transmission study. So there may even be levels of what distribution side work could get progressed depending on the project. But again, that's why we're saying case by case. So we'd have to talk for your individual project to see what could be possible.
Okay, thanks, Mike. So I do not see any additional questions. So we'll give it another minute here and see if anything else pops up. But in waiting for that, so we appreciate everybody joining the call and appreciate the questions. Obviously, if there are further questions, please feel free to reach out. Obviously, you can start with your job owner on your various projects, right? And that is something that Mike, myself, Jen Chalifo, Laura McLaughlin, as part of my team, right? George Souza, as part of the Simplified and Expedited team, Margaret Campbell. Apologize, Margaret. old, that's back in the day, right, is always available to be able to jump on a phone call. I will admit how we are busy, and it may not be always the same day, but we're definitely willing to make ourselves available to talk through different situations. The other aspect I'll bring up, right, is I think that we're all kind of learning too. As we move through this, right, as we see some of these changes, as we've dealt with some of these pretty significant changes over the last couple of years, we've learned a lot. We've made a lot of changes, I think, for the better. I think some of these things that we've been working through in 1955, again with the DG community, DPU, is eliminating some of the gray area that existed, and is definitely, I think, going to be helpful, right, as we continue through this process and look to see, right, as we know that there are immediate steps, right, the DPU is working through on cost allocation. As we get into these first group studies and we take some of those lessons learned and continue to, improve the process and improve the communication. So, like I said, sometimes we don't always have the answers right there, at the tip of our tongues, but it's definitely something that we discuss quite a bit internally, and we're always trying to work towards what seems like it makes the most sense and what would be most fair for right, the people and the projects involved. And then just a note here about when it's going to be posted. So we will be posting it on our website. This slide deck. Just to make mention, there is a additional slide deck that was presented to the projects in the area studies earlier this week. That will be posted also if you're looking for more information around what's been going on there. So there'll be more information posted, and we'll work towards getting that posted here in the next day or so, in addition to the recording for this seminar. So appreciate everybody making the time. Get your flu shot, stay safe, and like I said, we'll try to do another webinar here in the next few months, and at the very least, we'll probably get back together in April as we kick off the 2021 seminar season. Hopefully in a far better place than we are today, and hoping to get these back in person as soon as we're able. Bye, everybody. Thanks to the presenters, and thanks for everybody for attending.